Who will be the better dynasty wide receiver between Xavier Legette and Keon Coleman? Because both of these guys are part of a really strong wide receiver class, and they both have really positive things about their landing spots. But at the same time, neither of these guys are complete wide receivers. And on one hand, you've got Xavier Legette. This is a guy who has a DK Metcalf type of skill set and body type, and he exploded in the 2023 season, but he never crossed 200 yards receiving until 2023. And on the other hand, you've got Keon Coleman. This has been a solid player the last 2 years with some highlight reel plays I'm sure you've all have seen, but this guy also never crossed 1,000 yards, not once in his season, and he struggled as the pure #1 wide receiver at Florida State and at Michigan State. Now, in my opinion, I think that if the landing spot was different for both of these guys, this would be a clear and obvious choice, but we're going to go ahead and dive into who has the most dynasty upside between these two. But first, go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support if you get value from this video today. So the first guy I want to get into is going to be Xavier Legette right here. So Xavier Legette is going to be a guy that is someone that I was super interested before the NFL draft actually happened. I was so big on this guy's film, and we'll get into that as I go through my wide receiver prospect model, which I have honed down, and it's become super accurate. It helped me find later to mid-round guys like Jaden Reed, like Tank Dell, and like Josh Downs. So the 4 things that are most important on this wide receiver prospect model, the first thing is the breakout year. This is going to tell me how early or late a player was a key contributor on this particular offense. Because I'm not looking for a guy who had 300 yards receiving, and I'm not calling that a breakout. That's just not the way I do it. You need to have at least 500-yard receiving to be considered a breakout at the wide receiver position here. And Xavier Legette was a super late breakout. Super senior, to be exact. This was his 5th year, and he did not break out until this season. Now, granted, he did it in a big way, but it took him this long to do it, so that's a major concern, and that gets a D grade from me. This is the opposite of what I'm looking for. I am looking for the earlier, because the earlier the better, and it typically leads to how early or how long it will take an NFL wide receiver to break out at the NFL level. Now, the biggest thing, I can overlook the breakout year if the film breakdown grade is super impressive. The film breakdown is easily the biggest grade because I'm not just looking for general film. Oh, they look good and they made highlight plays. I'm looking at film here, and I'm looking for very specific things that I have found translate to fantasy football success. What was their route tree like in college? How diverse was their route tree? Are they purely big play threats? Because a lot of times, guys like that get shut down at the NFL level. But if that player is breaking off routes in the middle of the field, over the middle, underneath in short routes, on deep routes, if he's got good footwork to create lots of separation, that translates to the NFL level, and more specifically to fantasy football here. Now, with Xavier Legette, like I said, the reason I was super interested in Legette before the draft was because of his film breakdown. He got a B+ grade for me. Xavier Legette is not just a big play guy. I compared it to DK Metcalf earlier. He's got that big playability DK does, but in my opinion, I actually like his film better than I liked DK Metcalf's coming out of college. This guy is short, he's over the middle, he's a big presence on that field, and he can take any route that he runs for 6. He's so fast, so big, so physical, not afraid to use his strengths. B+ film breakdown without a doubt with Xavier Legette. Now, the 2023 target share is also important, and the reason I hone it down to 2023 is because I'm simply looking for guys that are coming into this year's draft, and I want to see what their most recent season was like with their target share, because theoretically, their most recent season should be their best season, and when they were most important and most used on their offense. And he didn't disappoint in this one either. 23.7% target share in 2023. That's a B+ grade. It's a really strong target share. He was clearly the main guy that Spencer Rattler was looking for at South Carolina. So this is a good metric right here. Shows me that they can handle a big workload when you have a guy like Xavier Legette break out the way he did in his super senior season. And then the NFL draft capital is the last thing. This is also very important because it determines how long or short your leash will be at the NFL level. First round guys, they're gonna have a much longer leash than a 5th round guy. And obviously, Xavier Legette went at the end of the 1st round. So even though it is basically like a 2nd round pick, this is still good draft capital that you can ensure he will be on the field probably right away for the Carolina Panthers. Now, when it comes to Xavier Legette's profile, there's no doubt he checks all the physical boxes. Like I said, DK Metcalf is my pro comp for him because of this. It's not because he's like bodybuilder level of physique like DK Metcalf is, but he's no small guy either. Xavier Legette's a big dude. That's a big dude, and his playing style is so similar to DK Metcalf's. This guy can make big plays like the top wide receivers in this class can. Malik Neighbors does the same thing. Rome Odunze does the same thing. Marvin Harrison Jr. does the same thing on big plays on any level of the field that Xavier Legette does. I don't care what level of the field. Short, medium, long, Xavier Legette can get the job done anywhere. And I even like his price, drafting him on underdog right now in best ball leagues, which is where you should be drafting right now. Use code FFN to get a 100% deposit match up to $100. Draft a team, pick Xavier Legette. It's no time commitment during the regular season. You can draft. Best ball is going to log your best score at each position in each particular week. Now, when it comes to dynasty rookie drafts, before the NFL draft, if you were mock drafting, the value was really there with Xavier Legette. Like, he was a bottom end second round pick. But of course, once he gets picked in the first round, it takes the value out of his draft position. He becomes basically a borderline first rounder, depending on if you're in a 10-team league or a 12-team league or even a 14-team league. He's basically bordering on the first round in ADP after he got taken in the first round. I don't like the landing spot, though. I've been very clear on this throughout the offseason. I think the Carolina Panthers are in bad shape. I really like Dave Canales. In fact, I love him. I think Dave Canales is a great offensive mind, but I will maintain this as I have said it all offseason. There are very few coaches in NFL history that can overcome horrific ownership, and I believe that's what we're looking at here with the Carolina Panthers and their problem with David Tepper. I think they're a mess, and I think that matters more specifically for Dynasty than it does for redraft, because we may have an outlier season with him, but long term, I don't think that Carolina's going to be able to overcome this. And I also just don't really trust Bryce Young in that type of environment, because it's not like he's a super talent at the quarterback position. He needs help, and I don't think he's getting it at the top level here. And with Xavier Legette, a super senior breakout is really just an ultra concern. If he did not have the film, like, I would have written him off immediately, because super senior breakouts very rarely translate to the NFL level. But because this film breakdown was so good, I have to take it into account. But my big question is, will it take years to show at the NFL levels? Because if so, that's so concerning, because he's already 23 years old, heading into his rookie season. So if he went to Buffalo with Josh Allen, that wouldn't be a concern for me, because I would trust the track that he's on so much more than I do with Carolina. But since he went to Carolina, that's a major concern for me. Now let's go ahead and get into Keon Coleman here. Let's run him through the same prospect model at the wide receiver position, see how he grades out in every single category as well. So the breakout year for him was impressive. Sophomore year, grade A at the breakout position. This is exactly what I'm looking for. I'm either looking for a true freshman breakout, a redshirt freshman breakout, or a true sophomore breakout. Those are the guys who are going to be the A grade categories for me, because again, shows me that literally, like, within your first 2 years of being on the field in football, at the college level, you can make an impact. So it shows if everything hits the right way and you go to a good landing spot, you should be able to be an immediate contributor. And it looks like that with Keon Coleman. Now, the film breakdown with him, it was also a B+, but I will say he was closer to a B than a B+. He did not have the film that Xavier Legette had, mostly because even with Keon Coleman, like, you see a lot of highlight plays with Keon Coleman. He's a guy who's really big on the highlight plays, but he's not the super athlete that Xavier Legette is. And I don't also think that he's as dominant consistently as Xavier Legette was, at least in 2023. Keon Coleman disappeared a lot. There was a lot of games where he would get like 2 catches for 20 yards. You'd have an occasional game where he'd get like 7 or 8 catches for 120, but that was few and far between with Florida State. So there was definite holes to poke in Keon Coleman's game, mostly regarding consistency. Now, his 2023 target share was also good as well, 20.2%. B grade right here, not as consistently there as the guy, as Xavier Legette was, as I was just saying, and the target share proves that. He was splitting time as the number 1 with Johnny Wilson, who was a 6th-round pick to the Philadelphia Eagles. So the fact that he couldn't separate himself from that guy, it's a concern. It's definitely a concern, and Johnny Wilson was the guy I liked. But Xavier Legette was just simply more consistent as the top threat for South Carolina than Keon Coleman was for Florida State. And his NFL draft capital, literally like I just said with Legette, he was basically a 2nd-round pick. Well, Keon Coleman was literally right there at the top of the 2nd round. So his leash, I wouldn't say is like necessarily shorter than Xavier Legette's, but it definitely is probably by a little bit since he's a 2nd-round pick rather than a 1st-round pick. But granted, he was Buffalo's number 1 pick this year overall. Now, let's address the film breakdown again. Again, I think a lot of people have seen the highlight reel plays with Keon Coleman. Like, he's got plenty of them. Keon Coleman, like, there's a highlight of him, like, leaping, like, 40 yards up into the air and grabbing a ball, like, with one hand. It's like, this guy can do a lot of good stuff on film, and he makes those highlight reel plays that everybody sees. I'm talking about film breakdowns here, though, and I'm not looking at highlights. I'm watching an entire player's game and every route that they ran, and his film is well-rounded. I will say, like, when he's at his best and when he's performing his best in the game, he's got a sweet double move to go deep. Like, he can create so much separation just based on that double move, and he can separate over the middle as well. This guy is all over the field, did a lot of things for Florida State's offense, and he did do it effectively when he was on. And he could take short routes to the house. Like, this guy, like I said, if he was on, he was doing well. And that's really the main reason I'm not concerned with his 40 time. His 40-yard dash time, if you guys remember at the Combine, that became a big story because Keon Coleman was considered a potential 1st-rounder by a lot of people. And a lot of people just assumed that when he ran at 4.6, this guy was going to go down in a lot of people's draft boards. Obviously, it didn't matter with Buffalo, and it didn't matter to me because I watched the film with this guy and I see that he can clearly separate. You know who else ran a 4.6? Keenan Allen ran a 4.6. Cooper Kupp ran a 4.6. Allen Robinson ran a 4.6. There's been so many wide receivers over the years that have been elite top 12 guys in fantasy football that have run 4.6s and even 4.7s. So it doesn't matter. It's not as important as it is at the running back position. There's been so many wide receivers over the years that have debunked speed being super important in fantasy football success. Now, the landing spot was also great. Obviously, like I said, he went to Buffalo. Everybody understands that he's playing with a top 2 quarterback now. And he's not only in that situation, he's got a direct path as their number 1 wide receiver. A direct path. There's nobody there that's really going to be serious competition for him getting number 1 wide receiver targets. Now, I think a lot of people have argued this might be a bad thing for Keon Coleman. Because like I said earlier, he was the sophomore breakout, yeah, but he never crossed 1,000 yards receiving. So he's likely going to be the wide receiver 1 immediately in Buffalo, but he never could separate as a true number 1 in Florida State. So will he fulfill wide receiver 1 duties in Buffalo? I think that's a legitimate question, and I think a lot of people argue he will not be ready. I would argue that I think it's good to throw a player into the fire. I don't think that it's ideal most of the time to have them sit and waste a lot of their prime years when they're young. I think it's good to throw players into the fire. That's how they grow a lot of the times. And obviously, with Josh Allen, that's about as good as you can get when it comes to any rookie wide receiver at a young age. So I'm going to bank on the side of that being a good thing rather than a bad thing because he has one of the best quarterbacks in football throwing him the ball. So lining the two of these guys up, Xavier Legette, Keon Coleman. It's a close one for me personally. Like, I like Xavier Legette's talent more. If I'm going based on talent, Xavier Legette is the guy. Now, both these guys basically have an equal amount of concerns that I have for both of them. Like, I have an equal amount of concerns. They're different concerns, but they're about equal. They're both boomer bust players. And obviously, the problem with Keon is that he never broke out as a 1,000-yard guy. And the problem with Legette is it took him so long to even cross 200 yards receiving here. Obviously, I like the landing spot with Keon Coleman better. I did a video researching a while back the value of landing spots for all positions in Dynasty Fantasy Football. And what I found in that video was that wide receivers are more impacted than running backs when it comes to landing spot. And Josh Allen is just such a good landing spot for a wide receiver. And I don't think Bryce Young and Carolina are. So I gotta stick with my guns. I'm taking Keon Coleman. So let me know what you think of these two guys in the comments below and who you prefer in Dynasty Fantasy Football.